Now, I want to mention, landscape architect that I am, something about this vegetation, because I think today I was giving a lecture once at the University of Georgia over here to the landscape architects over there, and this young woman, this is 15 years ago, raised her hand, and she, very erstwhile in the back, and she said, "What gives you the right to prune a tree like that?" There's even a term now in the landscape world when you see people cutting back crepe myrtles like they do, pollarding them, called crepe murder, right? This is a moral statement. So I have no idea what gives me the right to do that, except that I can. What gives me the right, to eat an ear of corn, right? What gives me the right to take the intestines of a cat and make guitar strings? I mean, chop down a tree and make, well, it's a moral statement. Now, part of that is because the way we use the word nature is very different from the way they would have used the word nature. So let me pause for a moment and talk a little bit about nature. When I say nature, we're going to bring nature into the city. What comes to mind? Trees. Okay, when the rats brought the bubonic plague into Siena, were they bringing nature into the city? Right? They were. Were they not? Is that not natural? Is the plague not natural? What gives us the right to eliminate the life of a bacterium? Well, I always explain it to my granddaughter, who's 4 years old, this way. I do not go out in my backyard searching for ants and roaches or spiders, right? If they're out there, I'll leave them alone. But if they come in my house, they're dead, right? And so I think that's sort of the answer of what gives us the right to kill a bacterium. But there's a more serious point to this, and that is that the word nature is a Latin word, natura, and there are several sort of things associated with it. If you look it up in the dictionary, you'll discover that the first definition is, if I used it in a sentence, it means the irreducible essence of something. So if I said, what is the nature of the problem, that is how it would have been used. And the Greek term for this, as using Aristotle as an example, would have been physis. Physis. There was physis and metaphysics. Physis was the physical, physics, and the metaphysics was that which traveled alongside of it, or in front of it, or beside it, which was the thing thought, right? And thoughts were real in the same way that that the physical material world that has space and occupy. I see it, I touch it, I feel it, I hear it, I smell it through the senses. This aesthetic experience of this, right? As opposed to something like justice, which is a little more, it's a real thing, but it is a little more ephemeral, a little more difficult to define, particularly materially. The term nature actually meant at this point in time, what is the nature of the plant? What is its essence? Whereas today we would just say it's anything that's not artificial. I just despise this sloppiness, and I'm going into this sort of lengthy sidebar because I cannot tell you the number of times I've seen architects say, I want to bring nature in the city, and I will always say, well, my dog poops down in the park. Is that actually nature in the city? Well, the answer is yes, but it's not a very good nature because that's going to have E. coli bacteria, and that's going to go into the storm drain that's going to sit down in there with all those oak leaves in the bottom of that thing because the city doesn't clean it out, and it's going to get anaerobic, and then when it rains, it's going to flush all that anaerobic bacteria into Peachtree Creek, which means somebody down at West Point, Georgia is ultimately going to have to drink that stuff. All right? So, what we're looking at here is the process of pruning back grapevines. And this practice comes from that. It's an old horticultural practice. And the result is that in the spring, Where the cut has been made, adventitious growth comes out at the point of the cut. That's actually what we're seeing here. And then that, because you can control it in a particular way, these are chestnut trees actually, you can do this with it, which means that you can use it architecturally in certain ways. This, for example, this kind of colonnade of trees, which then works perspectively toward whatever that is, assuming that's at the end of that alley, which is fairly significant, I suppose. And this was certainly put into service over a long period of time, and I think it's quite beautiful. And I will also mention for the architects in here, there's nobody in the United States that knows how to do this. Almost no one. You might find somebody at Winterthur Gardens or something, but don't expect, the Atlanta Public Parks maintenance crew to know how to do this. And if you watch them do it in France, what you realize there's even special equipment that they use to do this with, and that there are whole families and generations of people who have been doing this. Now, what they cannot do in France very well is grow grass. Whereas we can grow grass out the wazoo here. You have these guys in, uniforms that come out. They look like Ghostbusters. They have this stuff, backpacks on and mask and everything, and trucks pull up and they have all this sod rolled up. About 2 days, you've got something that looks like Augusta National Golf Course somewhere out here in suburban Atlanta. Ba-boom. The French couldn't do that if their lives depended on it, and we can't do this. So just keep that in mind materially, because you can never design something that someone doesn't know how to do. All right. Now the significance is that what this means is that the carotene pigments, these are actually Tilia cordata, little leaf linden, and when the new growth comes out, the new growth carries with it carotene pigments before the leaves come out. The maple trees have a lot of this in it, for example, and that's why some of them turn red in the fall when the tree stops producing chlorophyll, which acts as a mask over the top of the carotenes. It reflects light in the green spectrum, and then when it declines, it reflects light in the red spectrum. So for the French in the 17th century, this was working with nature, because they were, in fact, sort of revealing the nature of the material. Architecturally, it becomes significant because it means that you can create, as we see here in the Tuileries today, or in the 80s, you can see that there's an interior room here, and then here we have that kind of sidewalk we were looking at the plan with the main axis extension that becomes the Champs-Élysées over here on the right through the trees. These old men, my age, out there playing boule, bocce. Now, if we go to the Tuileries, to the Jardin de Luxembourg, built by the wife of Henry IV, eventually put into public service. It's a public park now. And the building, you're looking here at Soufflot's Pantheon, that's Sainte-Geneviève. And there's a statue of Pan because the building is known as the Pantheon. This is the model for the United States Capitol, by the way. And you see these chestnut trees that have been pruned back and pollarded in that way. And then if we walk outside the garden, what we see is that the buildings, the apartment buildings, are doing the same thing, reinforcing that same geometry. So the axis of the Pantheon here is extended down what is in fact the old Roman decumanus and into the garden itself. And again, it changes at the edge of the park from the vegetal to the mineral component. See that? And that is what will allow Paris. Here we see the Place de la Concorde. Just to orient you, here is the Louvre. There is Place Dauphine. Really, all of this really begins here. Here's the Louvre, the extension. The Tuileries came across here. This is actually then the extension. That's Lenot's overall scheme, which is extended across the Place de la Concorde with the obelisk, and then up the Champs-Élysées to the Arc de Triomphe. And there we have the round point, or the étoile, the star, with these avenues that are radiating out from it, including the Avenue Foch, which was originally built in 1855 by Baron Georges Eugène Haussmann and Louis Napoleon, the Emperor Napoleon III. And there you actually see a perspectival view of that. This becomes significant, I think, in a number of ways because, talk about superficiality, this was the site of the guillotine during the Revolution, right here. And there's no mention, no memorial of that, nothing, to the 2,000 people who lost their heads there.